So we've got a new tool, a new toy here at our compost facility. So we want to take a couple minutes to talk about what this is that I'm holding, how we got to acquire one, and what it's good for. So I'm Justin with Veteran Compost, and this is an oxygen probe. So the equipment itself is pretty simple when you think about it. We have this long probe. So this is actually going to go in the compost pile, hooked up to a tube, and the tube allows air to flow into this box, which then measures the amount of oxygen that's flowing through the tube. And so why this is useful is in composting, we want to have aerobic conditions. So if you think back to 9th grade biology class, you have anaerobic and aerobic type bacteria and reactions. And so in anaerobic conditions, like an anaerobic digester, for example, you can break down food scraps and organic waste, gather that methane gas, scrub it out, and either put it in the pipeline or combust it for energy. But in composting, we want to be aerobic. We want lots of oxygen. And so it's important to make sure that the piles you build, whether it's at home or at a commercial facility, you have enough oxygen. And there's a couple of considerations there in terms of particle size, frequency of turning, supply of oxygen, and things like that. And typically in composting, the agreed upon method of tracking your oxygen is to actually measure the temperature. Because typically in aerated static piles like ours, temperature is a good indicator of where the pile is at, also with oxygen. So a lot of facilities like ours measure temperature daily and then can interpret the temperature and some weather and moisture readings to then make adjustments to their blowers to change the amount of airflow so that the right amount of air is getting into a compost pile like the one next to me. Oxygen meters though, well, that's a great way to know exactly how much oxygen is in there. The reason we never owned one before is they can be expensive. So this one is from Demista Instruments. So shout out to them, I guess. This was given to us, so we were not paid to use this. This isn't a promo. I can't say how this compares to other oxygen probes because this is the only one we've ever used. And we're doing some testing right now of materials for an organization, and part of that testing required an oxygen probe. We didn't have one. They had it in their budget to provide one to us. And so that's how we came to have the oxygen probe. Now, the interesting thing about it is that, for 13 years, or 12 years, I should say, this is our 13th year, but for 12 years, we only used temperature. And so we'd always made assumptions on that temperature of what the oxygen was in the pile. And so it's been very interesting to compare what we assume and what we've believed against real world data now of oxygen. And the great thing is that we have seen correlations between our assumptions on temperature ranges with the oxygen that we're seeing in the pile. So what we'll do, we'll take this and let's go check out a couple different piles of material so that you can see, number one, how an oxygen probe functions, and then also get an idea of how oxygen levels can vary in different materials, whether they're static piles, whether they're aerated piles, whether it's material that's been sitting for a while versus material that's been freshly moved. All of those things impact the oxygen that you would find inside the pile. So with that, let's take a walk, let's check out some piles. All right, so one issue before we get started is these little holes right here. That's where the air enters the tube to be read, and you can see there's a lot of material in there. So what we're gonna do is we wanna make sure that this is cleaned out. So we'll remove the screw and clean it out real quick so that we want to make sure we're getting an accurate reading on this. Let's unscrew this. So it just has a little set screw in here that holds this cap in. Just want to be careful because I don't want to strip it. There's a lot of, as you get pushed in the pile here, unfortunately there's a lot of material that ends up in the end here. So we want to clean it out so that we get an accurate airflow, so we get an accurate sample. So just nod over the box. Wish I had my little eyeglass screwdriver from home. This would be a good job for that. Okay. So just a little plastic cap that comes out here once we get it unscrewed. And then I have a, so you can see that there. What we'll do is we'll kind of hold this down a little bit
pieces here. I have just like a small paper clip, so took a paper clip from the office. We're just gonna push it through these little holes to make sure that we're clearing everything out of there, and kind of hold it at a downward angle so that the soil falls out, or the compost falls out instead of traveling back up our tube and toward the sensors. So pretty low tech fix to making sure that we're going to get good airflow, because the whole point is we want to make sure we get a good representative sample of what's in here. So you can see all our holes now are clear. We'll put the cap back on there, and then off we go. Do the look down the barrel here. So yep, we look good. Okay, so we'll reset ourselves, and then we'll be ready to check it out.
We're up on top of the pile, more towards the middle of the cell, going from the top down, and we're at 7, so 7%. And I'd say that is still really, really good for a pile that the blower's been turned off here for a couple hours. We unplugged it to start moving some material around the site. So to still be at 7% oxygen inside the pile, really happy about that. Now, a couple of factors that help that. This is an older cell. This is one we're gonna move today. It's already been on oxygen and on air, I should say, for 30 days. So a lot of the decomposition, the bacterial stuff, the really hot stuff, has started to tail off. So this pile may have been at, say, 160 Fahrenheit. It's now come down to around the 130s, or even ideally would go lower. But in our case, we're at a point where we need to move it on our pad to make space for the next production. So part of the reason the oxygen may be higher is there's not as much bacterial stuff consuming as much oxygen as quickly, right? There's not as many living things getting after it like there was 2 weeks, 4 weeks ago. So that helps a little bit. So with being a little bit more mature. Also, we use wood chips here, so we have pretty good porosity in the pile. Using arbor chips allows the pile to really allow for good airflow when the air comes from the pipes, and then also from the sides and the top, making sure the air can get all throughout our piles. So that helps a lot. So to see 7% is great. We do run the blowers typically here 24/7. They are occasionally unplugged because we don't have underground conduit here. We surface lay the wires. We use 12 gauge extension cords from Amazon or the hardware store. So when we have to move equipment or trucks throughout the site, we have to unplug blowers. So it's been about an hour that this one's been unplugged. I'd be curious what that would be, you know, right after when the blower was on. It'd probably be closer to 18. If it was right after being on all night, you know, the ambient oxygen might be a little bit higher. So what we'll do is let's try turning the blower on, and let's see if we can watch that oxygen reading climb from 7, and see if we can shoot it up just by turning on our air supply. So now we've had the blowers on for about 1.5 minutes, and we're just a little bit off of where the pipe is. So the pipe is about 7 feet below us, but maybe just right on the edge here. Now we're at 7 to 8, now we're at 18. So in 1.5 minutes or so, there's been enough airflow that, you know, we operate on what's called positive aeration. So we're blowing air into the pile. That air is coming up through the pile. So it's had enough time to push through the pile and kind of start getting clean air in there. So ambient air, 21%, right? What we're breathing right now all around the planet. So this means that we're starting to see more of that ambient air working its way through the pile. So we're at 18%. So the blowers are starting after just 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to have an effect where this is going on. Now, if you study composting, windrow, or aerated static piles, you can look online. There's different charts about how fast, when a blower turns off or a windrow turner goes, how fast the oxygen level will drop in a pile. And so that's kind of the goal with the timing of your blowers, is you want to have the right size blower and the right frequency so that there's always oxygen, and you don't want to have these big ups and downs. There's some really cool work being done by some companies to really have oxygen probes or temperature probes in the piles, and have computers that are dictating when the blowers come on and off based on demand, to try to even out those curves and always provide the right oxygen. Because think about you if you're running a race, and you can breathe freely and run fast, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're running out of air. That's really tough to run a race. So the same thing for the microbes, is if we can have good airflow throughout the day, you know, that's great. So when we have the blowers on here, going on and off throughout the day like they're supposed to, that's our goal, is to try to keep the oxygen from having too big of drop-offs and never getting too low. So pretty cool to see. Turning the blowers on had a very quick effect to get oxygen in the pile. They'll shut off in just a couple of minutes, and then if they stay on their regular cycle, they come on frequently enough that we don't see these big peaks and valleys on oxygen inside the pile. So this is an active pile. Let's go check out some other material piles around the site just to get a feel to see what are other readings that we can find on here, and let's see how low we can go in finding things that do not have oxygen in them. This might be our winner here. So this is a product called mulch fines. So if you think about the mulch you buy at the store in most of America, generally they sell the larger, chunkier pieces because the smaller pieces are a big sponge for the dye, and the dye is expensive for dyed mulches. So if you're a mulch manufacturer, many places this is considered a waste product, this mulch fine product. So we actually get it trucked in from a mulch manufacturer. You can see the particle size really small, great for composting because we have this really small particle size, a lot of surface area, really absorbent because it's so dry. So when we're doing a lot of our organic compost, we mix this in because it's a great all natural wood product. So it's a good relationship between us and the manufacturer. But you can see the particle size is a lot smaller and it's really dry. And so our oxygen right here in this pile is at 3, so 3%. So this is a static pile, unaerated. This was delivered a couple days ago. And so just sitting here, the oxygen level very low. And a lot of that's probably because of the type of material, the size of the particle. It's not being aerated, but we're at 3%, so pretty low oxygen. So if you have a static pile of material like this, because it's so dry, because there's low oxygen, you're really not going to see a lot of breakdown because there's not a lot inside the pile to go on. There's a lack of moisture and a pretty low level of oxygen in there for microbes to do their business. So interesting to see, the differences in materials, this pile being at only 3% versus, what were we at? Anywhere between 8 and 18% in an aerated pile with bigger particles, forced aeration, a little bit more moisture, be able to get better oxygen levels. So here we are, just checking out one of the worm bins out of curiosity. Hey, what's the oxygen level for our worms here? So our bins are here in a hoop house, and we add layers of coffee grounds and some of our organic compost, eventually filling up the bin, periodically watering them throughout the week, keeping it nice and moist and keeping the worms this time of year shady. You see all the plywood will cover them during the day to keep some protection from the sun and keep the surface from drying out. So we were just adding some food in here this morning and thought, hey, curious to see what the worms are at. So we're at 9% there in worm castings, which is interesting because you have pretty wet environment. It can get kind of heavy, kind of saturated, and as water gets into the pore space, it forces oxygen out of the pore space between all the particles. So I don't think we ever get anaerobic. You never get any odors or really sense that. But we do have around 9% oxygen in the worm bin. So never had concerns about the worms not being able to breathe or things here going anaerobic, but out of just curiosity, we thought we had the tool today. Let's stick it in here, and we're around 9 to 10% in a worm bin. So overall, I'd say it's a really interesting tool for us to have. We've had it for a couple of months. We test stuff at least once a week for our different things, and it's kind of, from a science perspective, interesting to compare what you observe from the piles, what you've believed to be true, against tools like this. And if you check out some of our videos, we're going to share a couple other tools we've been doing, talking about how we test for moisture. We also have Solvita test kits we've been using recently. Another thing provided to us, something that was kind of expensive, we had never tried, but someone else bought them and we've been trying them out, so that's kind of interesting. So we'll do a video on those test kits as well. But this is an oxygen probe. I think it's kind of interesting, it's kind of compelling. If you ever found one where you got a good deal or you had the budget available, very cool to have around the compost site, and it's certainly something that we'll continue to use in the future as we add this to our other observations and the other data that we gather. So I'm Justin with Veteran Compost. This is our oxygen probe. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, whatever, let us know in the comments below. Thanks. Happy composting.